So a lot of conversations go around when it comes to influencer marketing. And Lyn, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you because I think you've had a bit of both sides in a way, being the one working with the influencers and sometimes sitting in the influencers' shoes. So I'm really interested to know what that is like. And I mean, I'll share quite a bit as well from my experience because in one way or another, I've also sat on both sides. And basically, by the end of this conversation, I know the biggest request that people had was they'd like to know what exactly do we phrase as best practices, because nowadays it almost looks like an influencer is just somebody famous, or somebody with lots of followers. And that has sort of become the measurement because if I work with someone who has 100,000 followers, am I not going to get results? So I feel like, this is one of those interesting topics that by the end of the call would be interesting to see how much we can demystify. And so I think I'll just start off from the perspective of, I know you've worked with a number of brands, probably gotten to work with influencers here and there, or maybe have friends in the space who've gotten to work with influencers. What do you think of influencer marketing? Does it work? Is it actually successful when it comes to some of the brands that have used it? Maybe, is there any case study or example you can give us where a brand worked with an influencer and they probably had a really good return on investment?
Okay. So I would first start by answering the main question, if influencer marketing actually has ROI. It definitely has ROI, but you need to be careful on who exactly is the influencer you're using or partnering with, because sometimes brands forget that when you're working with an influencer, you shouldn't be too focused on the influencer themselves, but their target audience, because those are the people that you're targeting, maybe to sell, maybe to influence behavior change, maybe to drive awareness to them. And in terms of your second question around a case study that was successful, I would mention ALX Africa in partnership with Mastercard, which was a campaign that I was working on in Nairobi, Kisumu, Mombasa, and Nakuru in 2023. So ALX was coming to the Kenyan market and they were looking for leads in terms of the EdTech courses that they were offering. They hadn't done an awareness campaign and they wanted to use influencers to drive uptake on these particular courses that they were pushing to the target audience. So what we did is we tapped into key opinion leaders. I would define those key opinion leaders as influencers who have built a community within certain niches. So if we are targeting maybe people in university, we would use a key opinion leader as an influencer who maybe has a group whereby they share job postings, whereby they talk about entrepreneurship. If there's a group, somebody who has a community of like software engineers, those are the people we used as influencers in mainly Instagram and the WhatsApp communities and Twitter. And why that campaign was successful is because we tested out the campaign for 2 weeks. That is an A/B test to just see what type of content resonates more with the audience, what conversations do people want to see. And then from that A/B test that happened for about 2 weeks, we were able to make a better plan for the rest of the influencer campaign. So with that campaign, we saw a reach of around 2 million with a 16% conversion rate. And the client was super happy because achieving that without having done an awareness campaign, they felt like it was good for them. And they became like a return client for the organization that I was working on. And even now we can still see the impact of ALX in the Kenyan market and even in East Africa. So that is really, really a great success story.
Amazing. And I'm so glad that you've mentioned that because honestly, when it comes to influencer marketing, I think for me, it's such a big deal to want results because then most of the time, then there are no results if you don't have a clear goal from the beginning. I remember for me, there's a campaign I worked on with influencers, but more smaller ones, not the really big ones that, you know, people really run for.
Yeah.
And the brand in question that we were doing a campaign for was Cortex. And I remember very well, we had such a great success rate working with many small influencers as compared to what we had with the bigger influencers. We had big numbers, of course, with the bigger influencers, but when you think of the impact in terms of what people are required to do during the campaign, then it wasn't necessarily that clear. And I think it goes back to brands. You know, who do you think is at fault? Is it the influencer? Is it the brand? You know, I feel like influencers sometimes, and I don't blame them, I mean, economy, are
Yeah.
just taking jobs for money. No, you mentioned target audience. I wonder why they can't tell a client, you know, your
Mm.
target audience is not amongst my following, so I don't think we should work together. I mean, who's at fault? What do you think?
This is a tricky question. You're putting me on the spot. But I would say it lies two ways. Because now it's like, in Swahili how we say mwenye haja huenda choo,
Yeah, yeah.
So the brand is the mwenye haja looking for the influencer
Mm,
actually do something for them. So if they don't do their research well and you've already pitched to an influencer that you want them on board, high chances they're not going to say no to money. They're just going to say, yes, I'll do this campaign. Maybe it's somebody who has a target audience of older women. They're just going to be like, yes, I'm going to talk about this sexual reproductive health thing. And maybe that's not what resonates with the target audience they have. So
yeah.
that end, I'd say sometimes brands need to do their homework
Mm-hmm.
before contracting and onboarding influencers.
I totally agree. And I love that the biggest part of this homework is audience, because once they get audience wrong, you know,
Mm.
everything else will probably come out. I usually say when it comes to influencers, you know, ask and you shall be given. We like
Yeah.
to pretend like influencers information is top secret, you know. Especially like rate cards, you know, it looks like gold, you know, we are mining gold. Yet, I mean, I was so surprised the first time I had to ask an influencer for their target
Mhm.
audience, and they gladly shared. And I was like, oh, hiya. You know, and I had to ask follow-up questions after that, and they happily answered. So I
Yeah.
think for me, it's really interesting that I think businesses should, you know, just learn that, you know, ask, and, you know, it shall be given whatever you'd like to know, including the details of trying to understand. You know, you'd reach out to them and tell them, you know, this is what my business does. I want us to work together to do this and this. If they say yes, feel free to ask them, you know, why are they
Mm.
actually interested in working with you as well? You've
Yeah.
expressed interest. What is so wrong about them expressing theirs? And I know some people have, you know, sensitive, can I say, reactions to that. I remember one client I have, she told me, no, you know, once you ask
Mm.
them why they would want to work with you, it makes you look like you're stooping so low, you know, and it makes you look like you're doubting what they have to offer. And I'm just like, you know, that's the reality of things right now. The way you'd go
Mm.
for an interview and get interviewed, just assume we're both trying to see if we're a fit for each other. So I don't think it's such a crime. Is there anything else you think maybe businesses should consider when identifying which influencers to work with?
I also think businesses should consider what are they willing to risk, because sometimes clients or businesses come in and they want a clean influencer. And you cannot tell me that ever since somebody, for example, opened a social media account, they've never posted anything that would be controversial. So a brand needs to think, am I willing to actually work with this influencer despite A, B, C, D? Because sometimes clients want a clean account with no scars on it, and it's difficult. Or sometimes it's not even controversial, it's just that they don't agree on certain subject matters, and then it becomes a problem maybe later during the campaign, despite maybe results showing in. So brands should also be very keen at the beginning on what risks are we willing to take when it comes to the influencers they contract.
What? See, you're shouting. Oh my God. Brands, I wish they were here. Huh? They should be here. Because the reason I'm saying you're shouting is because sometimes then that's such a big problem.
Mm.
I remember I worked with a brand, and I won't mention the influencer here, but I remember when the
Mm.
influencer was younger, you know, they had this photo shoot that they did that was, you know, almost
Mm.
semi-nude. And at some point, when we were working together with the client, then the picture started doing rounds. And
Yeah.
the client did not want to work with the influencer anymore. They wanted the influencer to delete all the posts they've done for the brand. And you're just thinking, really, guys, why did you not do your homework before? And these are some things that you can even flag to a client, and
Yeah.
they tell you, it's not a big deal. But later, when it's something that
Yeah.
people are talking about, all of
It
a sudden
becomes
you feel like, what? I can't deal with this. So I definitely think, risk is something that they need to think about, including
mm,
little things like you may talk to the influencer right now, but probably get to know their true colors as they execute their campaign. I mean, we all know of influencers who take up jobs for money and, eventually they use the product and or service and all of a sudden they're talking negatively about them. That's another risk you have to think about. It could
mm-hmm.
go either way. And I think something else that's very big for me is, other than just looking at followers and their
mm,
target audience, there are many other things that can be looked at, such as even results from previous campaigns. Influencers share this, generously. But for
Yeah.
you, I think one question I'd really love to hear
Yeah.
what you think about is when it comes to total number of followers,
mm,
influencer marketing wise. Does it really matter? Is it better to work with one big influencer? Would you say we have a mix? Is it, dependent on campaign? What are your thoughts
mm-hmm.
around that?
From my experience, I would say that it varies based on the nature of the campaign, first.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, based on the nature of the product or service. So I cannot say there's a one size fits all when it comes to influencer marketing, because sometimes you need to have like a mix of macro, micro, and nano. Sometimes you can use one of the segments and they produce results. So it depends on the two things that I mentioned earlier, which are the nature of the product or service, and the nature of the type of brand or campaign goals that you have.
Nice. I like the nature of the brand. I mean, it takes me a little bit away from, I know, what we had initially talked about, but I'd love
Mm,
to know for you as a consumer,
mhm.
have you been influenced before by an influencer?
Well, good question. Yes, yes, I have.
Nice, nice. And I mean,
Yeah.
is it solely
Uh,
because you needed the product or service, or would you
mm,
say maybe you actually did not even really overthink in terms of they were selling, maybe it fit well
mm,
into their day-to-day? What do you think actually got you to
mhm.
get influenced, if you don't mind sharing?
I don't think for me it was like a need. I'd put it in the want category, but because I trusted the opinion of this particular influencer in terms of how they communicate, what they communicate, and they're always very genuine. So because I feel like I have that trust relationship with them,
Mm-hmm.
it 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 let me use the word we're using, influenced me to
Mm-hmm.
actually go to this particular restaurant and experience it.
Nice. I like that. I mean, for me, I have been influenced before, and funny thing, it didn't look like the influencer was working for a brand. It
Mhm.
looked like it was their day to day.
Exactly.
Specifically, it was Showmax, specifically Patricia Kihoro.
Mm.
And I mean, later on, when I found out she's part of the influencers, I was so like, oh wow, like I wouldn't have been able to tell that that's what was happening. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad that that happens. Fadila, feel free to share your insights and comments in the chat section in case you can't unmute. But if you'd like to unmute, feel free to just raise your hand and we can let you jump in onto the conversation. So, I mean, we've talked quite a bit about, the different things that come in, but I know the biggest question that many brands have is
Mm.
how exactly can you craft um,
Mm.
a genuine or authentic partnership with
Mhm.
influencers,
Mhm.
to ensure that it resonates with your audience. Most times we know that, influencers would like to be paid for the
Mm.
services they offer. But, are there other ways? I've heard of brands that sort of send PR packs. what are some of the ways that you've used or that you've had other marketers use and, you think would work?
Hey, okay. This one is also a tricky one.
Yeah.
Um, Definitely top of the list, influencers want to get money because it takes a lot of them. Some of them have to hire videographers, sound engineers. Some of them have teams around them when they create particular content for different campaigns. And as we've seen now, Melanie, people want quality content, right?
Yeah.
So a brand cannot ask an influencer for quality content and they want to pay them with PR packages. It's very, very difficult for an influencer to take such a job. And I definitely get where they're coming from because imagine if you have a team to pay, you cannot give them maybe chocolates and tell them, hey, brand X give us chocolates. I'll give you each 5 chocolates. That's going to be your transport. That's going to be your rent. It doesn't work like that. So on top of the list, clients or businesses just need to have monitorial compensation, remuneration for influencers, goods and services and whatever packs that you want to give can come in as secondary, but money always opens up better delivery from the influencers and better rapport. That's what I'd say. In terms of the packs, for influencers who are starting out, they might be open to getting a product or a service and push your brand on social media. But in the long term, once they start like establishing their roots in the industry, you might find that then the packs don't work because then they have bills to pay. Some of them are doing the content full time and they're growing, having teams. Then they then need the compensation in a monetary way.
Nice. And I like that you mentioned both primary and secondary, because most times then we don't think about it like that.
Yeah.
One thing I worry, especially in the Kenyan space, some influencers don't have rate cards. Those who have do not have packages. They have, let's say, like one fee. So I'll charge you, yes, 15,000 per Instagram reel. And I'm not saying it's not negotiable, but that's the price. Take it or leave it. As compared to, I'm charging you 15,000 per reel if the reel is X amount of minutes. So that if I can afford a minute, am I paying for a minute? Or if I can afford, this kind of amount, of course, keeping in mind all those things like transport and all that. And it really worries me because then the smaller businesses are left out. And I was very happy when some influencers introduced market days because that sort of solved a very big problem for small businesses. But the question became, some influencers do their market days very well. They'll choose a few businesses and only market those ones. But others take anything and everything. So you're lost in the noise as a brand, simply because I'm marketing anything or everything. So, I hope that even as people catch up on this recording, that's something that people will have in mind. How can we change the narrative sort of going forward? How can influencers readjust their packages to fit? And I'm not saying that we all need to be targeting small businesses. Maybe we're not their target audience, but I don't think it's possible for all the big boys to be targeting the big boys. I think sometimes there's a balance, or is the problem that we're not growing sort of equal influencers in terms of the ones who are very big, the ones who are starting off, the ones who are in between? Maybe that's also the issue. Maybe, I don't know, maybe people need to get trained on how to be an influencer. What do you think?
Actually, it's interesting that you've mentioned that the training part. But in my opinion, I feel like anybody can be an influencer. Just think about it, even let's say, for example, your mother. She might have told a cousin, a friend, I use this type of milk, it's been working well for my family. And then this auntie of yours or cousin of yours goes and buys the same milk. that is your mom influencing somebody, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And that only happens when there's trust, when there's a trust relationship, and your mom maybe communicated, just it was authentic. There was no advertising language or whatever. They
Yeah.
just said, I love this milk, it's doing great. They were just authentic about it, you get.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't say training can work to some extent, but the trust plays a bigger role. The trust and authenticity plays a bigger role when it comes to digital channels and communication on digital platforms.
I totally agree. So maybe also as brands, we need to refine our shopping style, for lack of a better way to put it, when it comes to choosing influencers.
Mm,
Because in real sense, when you think about it, when you say it like that, then everyone
mhm,
is an influencer in one way or another when it comes
yeah,
to certain things. I
yeah,
remember for me, the first, can I say, brand partnership I had, when they reached
mhm,
out to me, I was so confused. I was like, Ati, who is an influencer? What? Me?
mm,
Are you sure? I don't even have followers. What do you mean? And I mean, when they explained their case, I was like, oh, yeah, but they can do it, like
mm,
they can actually do it. And I was so surprised. And that's when I started looking at influencer marketing from a different perspective. Because if
mhm,
this whole brand trusted me with my 1,700 followers to
yeah,
influence a product for them, surely it means something. So I definitely
mhm,
love that that authenticity has come up, because then it
yeah,
becomes easier for people to trust. It also
mhm,
becomes easier for me to curate content for my audience because it's naturally in me and it's not
mhm,
forced. I'm not, thinking of a script. I've seen Fadila has asked a question in the chat. We'll tackle it in a bit.
mhm,
I'm not thinking of, hey, we need to crack this. How do we sell to these people? It's almost natural. So I really
mm.
like that that has come up.
Okay,
Nice. Thanks for that. So, I mean, to the hard question of
yeah.
ROI. Eh, on the
I know.
client side, ROI is sales.
Yeah, let's just be honest. Let's just be honest.
Yeah, let's be honest, they don't care about anything else. On the influencer
Yeah.
side, I mean, what is ROI?
Mm.
What do influencers see ROI as? Because then for clients it's sales and they don't want to hear anything else. Any thoughts on that?
I like how you mentioned first that we know for clients it's always sales. I know sometimes we sugarcoat, we're like, we want awareness. We just want we just want awareness for the campaign. Don't worry. For influencers, ROI can be different.
Mm-hmm.
For some influencers, their return on investment might be the monetary value they get from this partnership.
Mm-hmm.
For other influencers, it might be portfolio growth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for another influencer, it might be a learning opportunity. Maybe it's a new industry that they've gotten into by doing a campaign for them.
Mm-hmm.
For another influencer, it might be a long-term relationship, which they would like to grow with a brand because they value their voice, they value how their audience perceives them. So that long-term relationship would be return on investment in the growth that they have done in nurturing a community that trusts them, and then now communicating or growing with a brand. So it varies from influencer to influencer.
Nice. And I definitely think that that's something important to, can I say, talk about or lay down from the very beginning, because
Mm,
client A could be coming with sales, and yet, like you said, for influencer A, for them,
mm,
return on investment is a totally different thing. And I'm not going to lie, it's not a crime to say that, your end impact as an influencer is awareness. I mean, then
mm,
that clearly means that clients should come for you if they just want awareness. We have
yeah.
influencers who clearly say they are conversion based. I think Caroline Mutoko, if I'm not wrong, is a conversion sort of influencer, especially for high-end stuff. And
Okay.
so I think it's really good to think about that, and makes it easier even to track performance, because sometimes
Yeah.
clients work with influencers all they're going to follow is the sales and the followers. Did our followers increase? That's all they're going to look at. But there's more to tracking. There's more you'll be able to analyze to be able to know, is this actually working or not? To be able to get, like really good, tangible results. But when you think about it as well, the reason I have asked that question is because at the end of the day, what you measure depends on the campaign you're pushing as well as the influencer you're working with. And I know, for example, for you, Lyn, on the influencer campaign you worked for, I don't know if you got to use different tactics just to ensure that you get the maximum effort from influencer marketing. Was it only influencers sort of curating content on their digital platforms, or did you maybe have on-ground events where you had influencers attending? Did you have maybe different tactics that you were using? Maybe tell us a bit around that.
Okay, for some of the campaigns that I worked on, they were fully digital. And then there were others whereby there was a mix of both the digital, semi-offline and offline. And sometimes with NGOs that I've worked with, which are in the impact side of organizations, they're mainly usually focused on social behavior change. So you'll find that they have both the online working hand in hand with the offline, and sometimes you bring the online to the offline and then push back that content online. I don't know if that makes sense.
Sense.
Yeah, so you find that you can do mix and matches of offline and online, and sometimes it's fully online.
I like that. And I think many brands need to learn that lesson in terms of just being able to work with influencers sort of on a 360. I've gone for many events where, they'll call an influencer to come and sort of do photo ops with people, and it will end on ground, that is never going to get online. So, I mean, why did we have that person there? Really, really, really. So I like that has even come up. And I think even as we keep building up on that conversation, just being able to connect it from online to offline and vice versa, sort of gives this form of, what can I call it, transparency, this sort of opportunity to interact with them both on an online and offline level. And I think from a digital perspective, then we know how critical these interactions are, and these interactions being transparent and authentic is very important. We don't want the person we meet offline to be totally different from the one we meet online. And I think when it comes to campaigns as well, especially the influencer marketing ones, being transparent is extremely important. I know many, can I say, influencers sometimes include the paid partnership with ... What do you think of that? Do we water down influencer marketing when we sort of put that tag, these people who add hashtag ad? Do we have to actually announce the partnership? I actually wonder why some brands do it, but I mean, I'll share my thoughts after you. What do you think of
Well, okay, I'll be honest, I've done both with influencers from my experience. And sometimes you find the ones that don't have the ad placement or post, let's say sponsored by, you'd find that perform well in comparison to the paid by or sponsored by. But in the times that we're living with, I'm sure you've heard of the trend of de-influencing that is there. So it then becomes a point where we need to grow as the industry grows. And that authenticity or transparency that we're talking about, it then needs to also show in, let's say, written copy that this is actually a sponsored post or this is a paid ad, because the target audience or audiences are actually demanding that authenticity from, let's say, an influencer, content creators, and stuff like that. So sometimes you just need to find the balance. That's why I always advise when you're doing a campaign, especially a long-term campaign, or maybe even a campaign that's just 6 weeks, test out, do an A/B test to see, is doing posts with the sponsored ad working? Test also to see content that doesn't have the ad or hashtag, whatever, sponsored by, and see which one works best. But I do understand that for some brands in specific niches, especially let's say alcoholic brands, some of them you have to adhere to that due to the DMCs they have, and there's no way to circumnavigate that. But the only way you can find what works best for you is to test, so you can have data to back up your strategy.
Man, these clients should have been here. I think testing is something I really shout about. I'm always about testing. I'm always about learning what works and doesn't work. Just the same way, if you are to keep on track with what's happening in the digital space, you know, do a lot of learning. So I really believe that that's something quite clear, quite good, and it helps you avoid very many problems. I think for me, the biggest problem I've seen when it comes to brands saying that influencer marketing doesn't work is simply a problem of not setting clear goals from the very beginning. And worst of all, not knowing how you're going to measure those goals. I don't know what you think is the biggest, you know, cause for influencer marketing not working for some brands.
Definitely, I agree with you. When you don't have clear goals, it's going to be a problem. When you don't have clear channels of attribution, it's going to be a problem. When you don't think audience first, it's going to be a problem. Always, I'd say those are my 3 pointers. But sometimes with influencer marketing, you might come in and say, hey, Melanie has 50K followers on Instagram, for example. We're trying to push this hotel. It's in this location. So Melanie will give us the numbers. But if you ask the brand, what numbers are you trying to get? They don't know. They're not so sure. And sometimes even with as agencies or as marketers, people just run into starting the campaign and they don't want to build that rapport with the client to understand what exactly are you trying to get out of this, for you to have a better briefing to give to the influencer, or to even stand up to the client and tell them, influencer X cannot work for us because of XYZ, you know? Yeah.
I love it. Audience first. I think that's something that keeps running in my head simply because all brands want to do influencer marketing. Everybody, just because everybody seems to be doing. But do we have to? You know, do we really have to? Those are some of the questions I like to ask myself. And it goes back to audience, you know, goes back to audience. Of course, budget should ideally be the last thing, but goes back to audience. So maybe as we wind up, if you were to advise a marketer who is currently working with influencers and, you know, is struggling in one way or another, and they'd love to know how can they optimize their campaigns with influencers, you know, how can they improve their return on investment, what advice would you give them?
So number 1, I would start with having clear goals. Have clear goals that are very specific to the entire campaign and to each influencer that you're working with. So what do I mean? For example, you are doing a campaign that is a lead generation campaign, and you're targeting maybe 1,000 leads in a span of maybe 6 weeks, for example. And in your maybe what 100 influencers.
Sorry, your audio is a bit shaky.
Okay, can you hear me well?
Yes, you're back.
Okay, thank you. So I was saying you need to have clear goals that are tied to the entire campaign, and also clear goals tied to each influencer. So if you're doing a lead generation campaign and you have maybe 6,000 leads that you wanted to achieve for this particular campaign, you need to be able to calculate to granular data to see how many leads would you require from each influencer, and then up that number by maybe 10-20%, and that's what you communicate to the influencer so that it acts as a buffer based on the goals that you have for the entire campaign. So always have clear goals. Secondly, always think audience first. When I say audience first, when you're looking for an influencer, think about the demographics, the psychographics in the target audience, in the people who follow them, and how that audience matches to the type of people that you're trying to reach. If you get that wrong, no matter what tactics that you pull in, your ROI won't be looking very good. Third, I would say you need to always be open to testing, because with digital marketing or even with marketing, there's no one size fits all. It depends on the nature of the campaign, the nature of the business. Algorithms come to play, trends come into play. Sometimes there's fires on social media. I don't mean like literal fires, but there's just something cooking online and it pushes people away from the campaign in one way or another. So you definitely just need to get it right in terms of testing to be able to see what works and what doesn't work and what can be optimized. Fourth is be able to actually be open-minded to look at influencers as partners. Because sometimes as marketers, an influencer might be telling you, I want to go this direction. They're still within the brief, but you're very keen on controlling their creative direction or their execution, and then it ends up not being authentic to their audience, and it makes you lose results. So when working with influencers, don't give them a script. Give them a briefing and give them the autonomy to have creative direction. Of course, they should stick to whatever themes or content strategies that you have, but creative execution should definitely be in their hands for them to talk in a very authentic way that their audience will resonate with, so that it doesn't seem like, why is Nani talking to us like this? This feels very pushy, very advertisement-like. So those are the 4 pointers I'd put.
Wow, wow, wow. In fact, you answered the question we had on the chat around script. Thank you for that. I know clients really love to have control over what the influencer says, but it needs to be done carefully to avoid ruining the authenticity of it. So I love the idea of brief, and sort of allow them to get with that. Just the same way, you'd go for those of us who've, heard a bit about how interviews go on TV or on radio. You're basically told what you talk about. You're given the don'ts, not the do's, the don'ts, and you sort of work from there. So I think that's a really good way to work, even when it comes to influencers, because it makes work a lot easier and still enables them to remain, authentic. For me, I think one of the big things I would say is focusing on relevance when it comes to influencer marketing. Relevance from a perspective of the things that you've mentioned, Lyn, from demographics to interest. Sometimes depending on what your company does, values could also come in handy. So something to think about. I think goals we've talked about, but I think biggest of all, sometimes when you're optimizing or selecting your influencers, maybe just make use of some influencer marketing tools. Little things like understanding what their engagement rate is like to be able to track things is something you can get through some of the tools that are available for free online. So as you can see, this conversation is quite important, both from the influencer side, but also from the client side. I'm hoping that whoever catches this recording, whether an influencer, whether a client, will find benefit from it. But I think as we just wind up, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add on or say maybe that we've not touched on, Lyn, based on this conversation. And maybe in the meantime, Fadila, Cynthia, if you have a question, feel free to just raise your hand and then we'll get to it after Lyn speaks. Anything to add on?
I definitely agree with what you've said. Like, leveraging tools is very important because technology is here to help us. Let's use it. And yeah, I'm open to maybe people reaching out in case you have any other queries that we didn't cater to. You can reach to Melanie and I can probably answer you, or even during the chat here.
Great. I agree. We'll open the floor for some questions. Of course, in the meantime, as we do that as well, I'll share a link to Aswani's LinkedIn profile in case you'd like to connect. Feel free to connect with her on that side. And I mean, if you have a question directly for her, I mean, I think she'll be happy to answer that even on that side or here. So I think for the next 2 to 3 minutes, I'll just take any questions that we have from Fadila or Cynthia. If no questions, happy to hear any comments you may have. Anything from you guys? At least we hear your voices. I know you joined in late, but anything, any reactions, any key takeaways? No pressure, so don't drop off just because I picked you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm laughing the way you say don't to drop off because of pressure. Um, there's a point that has been said about you can use the online influencer tools before contacting an influencer to look at the engagement rate. So just like some clarity on that, or just a mention of the tools that would help.
Okay. Thank you for that. We will get to it. Fadila, any question, any comment from you? That's if you're able to unmute. If not, that's also okay.
Thank you, Melanie. My question will be, at what point should you maybe start using influencer marketing? Because I feel for me at the initial stages of maybe marketing, it's not something I don't know, but what stage exactly or at what point should one start maybe using influencer marketing in their strategy as one of their strategies they mean to enhance brand?
Great, thank you for that. Lyn, I don't know if you want to take any of the questions or maybe start off with whichever, and then I can jump on.
Okay, I can probably start with Fadila's. Fadila, personally, I'd say that with influencer marketing, you can start it at any stage of the business as long as you're digitally ready, like there are systems already within your business or within the clients that you're working for that can support this marketing, digital marketing through influencers, because attribution needs to be clear. Influencers, for example, cannot be pushing people to buy a product on an e-commerce platform, and on maybe your Google Analytics, you're not able to see the back end data of where the traffic is coming from. You don't have unique URLs on the website. You don't have the bandwidth on your website to accommodate traffic. So at any stage of the business, you can incorporate influencer marketing just based on the needs of the business. Of course, complementing it with other types of marketing so that you can get the best value from your marketing strategies. Melanie, you can maybe also add on, then we can go to Cynthia's.
I totally agree with that. One thing that we need to remember, you don't have to use influencers. But if you do, I think the point that you get to know that you need to use influencers is probably at a point where you realize that the target audience you're targeting most of the time finds out about products or services from influencers. And there's a high likelihood that that's what they'll trust as compared to your brand probably running a sponsored ad online. They'd prefer for it to come from an influencer. And how can you get to know these simple things like surveys, can give you a good guide when it comes to that. So maybe just trying to understand how people find out about product or services, give them options like, is it from influencers? Is it from online? Who are they likely to believe when they see an advert? Is it, a company's website, a social media page, an influencer, that sort of thing. So for me, that's what I'd add on based on what Lyn has said. I think for Cynthia's question, it would be better for me to demonstrate what tools are there, different ones. I think for today's session, I'll just focus on two. Earlier this week, I bumped into a platform called Modash, which you can see on my screen. And I don't think it's really, okay, I don't know, let's say it's a tool or something, but basically they allow you to, search and analyze different profiles for influencers to be able to make decisions. And when you do a search, you get insights like this. So you get to know, say you want Shakila, for example, to be an influencer. You get to understand how many followers does she have on Instagram, like a platform, what's her average engagement rate, what are her average likes per post, and where is her audience in terms of location. So I'll just scroll down a bit, but you'll realize that you get different information from different people and different accounts. So this is just one example of a tool that you can use. Most of the time you find very many engagement ones, but this one has a bit more information around it. Maybe now I can go to an engagement calculator, assume maybe I'll just use my profile. I'm not famous, but let's see what that brings. So if I wanted to know what's the engagement rate for this profile, all I have to do is come and search for the profile. And at the bottom, after some time, you'll see generating the total number of followers that the account has, as well as the engagement rate. Little things like this could go in handy, So you'll see I have 1,500 followers. My engagement rate is 1%, and average interactions per post is 25 likes, 1 comment, So of course, if you do the paid version of some of these tools, you get to understand even more, So you can see that on average, this is where I fall. People with 1,000 to 5,000 followers usually have an engagement rate of at least 6% on a high. So you can see as the influencer increases their followers, sometimes then the engagement rate could actually go low. So these are just a few insights you can see. These are the top tools that come in mind. I'm sure if we do a bit more research, we can bump into many. But Cynthia, I hope that is good for a start. Great. Anything to add on, Lyn? Any tool maybe that you've come across?
I agree with you. I've used some paid tools, but they're quite pricey. So if you're one team or a small marketing team, it can be challenging. But there's also a tool called IMEI. Let me see if I can share my screen.
Let me just access. There you go.
Or maybe I can share the link on so you can open it if it's too hard.
No, you can share your screen now.
Okay. Okay. So there's this tool called IMEI. It's an influencer marketing AI. However, it's a priced model. It's not the cheapest, but in terms of value, you find that it gives you so much information. It even helps you with the outreach messaging. It helps you in terms of even maintaining a dashboard for like clients if they need to pop in and see results. I would say it's something good to invest in when you have the capacity, but as a start, definitely what Melanie has recommended.
Amazing. Thank you. And I mean, as you get your clients growing, then these budgets will look very small. So don't be shocked. I know some big Kenyan brands that utilize tools like those. So definitely completely possible. Wow. This session was wow. I feel so good. And time has gone just like that. It's 8 p.m. in Kenya. Thank you so much, Lyn. What time is it in your country?
It's 6:02 p.m.
Thank you so much for joining in. We really appreciate. I think I'd love to just leave it there. I don't know if you have any final words or any, offers. We could be your clients. So yeah, this is your opportunity to shine.
Okay, thank you so much, Melanie, for this opportunity. It's been an honor, because I've also learned from you over the years. So it's been an honor for you to actually give me this opportunity. And anytime, if you have any questions, you need any clarity, you can reach out to me on my LinkedIn, Lyn Achieng. Also, the link has been left in the chat, and looking forward to interacting with everyone more and more in the future as we grow and learn together. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you for joining in, Fadila, Cynthia. Any final words from you? maybe in one word or one sentence, how was today's session for you? We can start with Fadila, then finish off with Cynthia.
Thank you, Melanie. For me, the session was actually an eye-opener. I've not tried to actually use an influencer. I think something that I'm looking forward to. So for me, it's basically was an eye-opener to, like what you say, the don'ts, and then you can now craft your way ahead. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I think Cynthia dropped off, no problem. But for me as well, in as much as yes, I was moderating, I have learned so much from you as well, Lyn. It's so nice to see your growth in the digital space. So I'm
Thank you.
really happy about that. But yes, that's it from me. Today was amazing. I do not want to water it down, so I'll just leave it there. Everyone else will catch up on the recording. Cynthia has
Yeah.
joined. Cynthia, any last words before we drop off?
No, it was an eye opener. I've actually got to learn the most important aspects to look at when hiring an influencer, and also when to decide whether you need an influencer or not. So it has been very informative and insightful. Plus, I've learned 3 new tools today.
Thank you, Cynthia.
I'm so glad. So yes, have a great evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. See you at the next event.
Okay, thank you. Kwaheri.
Bye.